Hi. Um, so my name is Adam Bennett. I teach the motion design course at Escape Studios along with Ed Brown. I've been teaching it for a couple of years. And this webinar is going to cover animating client-approved storyboards. So we're gonna look at a storyboard that's been approved, and then I'm going to go through the process of analyzing the storyboard, creating an animatic, breaking it down into which parts you want to animate in certain ways, different techniques, and sort of general workflow, and hopefully good workflow tips. So what I'll do is I'm going to share my screen and then start off by showing you the storyboard. Okay, so this is the storyboard. The reason I chose this for the webinar is there's lots of tutorials out there that are procedural, and also, so I can see someone's raising their hand. With if you've got any questions as we go along, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. So I'll try to look out for any questions. Let me just bring that up. But we'll have time for questions at the end. But if there's anything as we go along, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. And actually, I'm going to type something here just to check that it's actually working. Test chat. So you should be able to type your question in here. I'll keep an eye on it, but there'll be time at the end to cover questions. So yeah, there's been a lot of YouTube tutorials on procedures, like how to do this and that. Generally, most things in motion graphics, if you know a little bit, you know enough to to research and to find out how to do specific things. But there's maybe not so much on workflow and creativity, how to deal with clients and how to manage projects and time, budget projects. So that's what I wanted to look at. So this storyboards was created by an ex-student of ours on the motion design course, Connie Lee. And she's done a very good job. So the storyboard, I'll go through. So it's all brand colors of a particular client, and this is a brief I worked on recently for my sister. So keep your family on board, because they might end up being your client. And so we're not going to look at the creation of the storyboard itself. We're just going to look at taking it from storyboard to animation. So I'll show you the finished thing. Put the audio on. The audio is very much slapped on, but I'll keep it on anyway. What I might do is put it side by side with the storyboard. I'm going to turn the audio off. I really hate this audio. So this is part of the animation that differs from the storyboard, and we'll look at we'll look at why that is later on. Okay, so that's the final animation. So let's have a look. Right, so whenever I get a project, generally, or a storyboard specifically, the first question you should be asking yourself, and I ask myself, is, does the storyboard serve the narrative? So it's always worth looking at. The storyboard has been signed off, but I don't think you should have the attitude that it's sacrosanct and it's this is a Bible that you have to follow. If you have any better ideas, or if you have any input, then that's part of what you're being hired for. Your job is to communicate the message as best you can. So I'd look through the storyboard and ask yourself, is everything in this storyboard conveying the idea as best it can, and is it serving the narrative? So it's good to go back to the script, and in this case, this was a project where it didn't have a voiceover, so the storyboard frames have the text on screen at the same time, which as a motion designer isn't necessarily the most appealing prospect. You'd much rather have these frames here uncluttered by text. I mean, for a start, it's a little bit distracting, and you're faced with the problem of, where is the viewer looking? Are they looking at things that you're animating, or are they reading the text? And you're asking them to do both in this case, but then that's your job to find the solution. So in this instance, what I do and what I did was go back to the script, and in this case, the script is basically the text that's on screen, essentially. So all the text is just being put. Nothing fancy has been done with the text itself. It's just on screen, the same size, with the exception of one or two parts where the storyboarder has picked out certain phrases, such as here and here, where it's more prominent on screen. So you're actually animating these text elements. The only part when I saw this that I wasn't sure about is the part that I pointed out that I changed, and we'll get back to that later. But the idea in this case is, without going too deep into the product or service itself, is this is something that gets you high value users. So these are in the storyboard. These are shown with crowns. So you've got these user icons here, and they should be throughout as well. I think we have it here as well. So this is to note that these are high value users. So the gist is for people not to throw their money away trying to get users on apps that aren't going to be buying stuff. This service offers you access to users which are high value and will buy stuff. So essentially it's saying, don't throw your money away. We'll sort of, get you straight to those high value users. And so this part of it, they've got this analogy of the claw in a arcade. If you ever spent time in an arcade when you were young, that grabs fairly shitty prizes, but except, as you know, the claw really doesn't work and you never grab the prizes, so you end up coming up empty-handed. But that didn't really work for me as an analogy. But so that was one thing when I started. I was thinking, okay, so that's something I'll deal with later on. But you've got a budget for your project, and you've got a certain amount of time based on that budget. So the first thing to do is to budget your time and figure out how long you're going to spend doing certain things. So it's always good to do an animatic for this sort of video, like an explainer video, because then the client can get an idea of timing. You definitely don't want to start animating the final thing just chronologically as you go through. Be sending it in chunks, because if they start adjusting any timings of things, if you've animated them with hundreds of thousands of keyframes, that's going to take you a lot of time. So let's have a look. So I've made some notes here which I might have to refer to, but okay, full process, make the idea clear. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Okay, so here's a rough budget for a two-week duration. Since this was for family and it was mates rate, so I didn't have this this time budget. I spent longer on it. But for an actual client, well, she was an actual client, it's my sister. But if it was any other sort of paying client, I'd restrict my time based on how much you're getting paid. So you might look at how long you've got, say 2 weeks, and split it up. So the first day you're working on an animatic, and then say day 2 to 7, that might be whip 1, which is the main animation. And I'll go into more detail about sort of what that covers. Now that's 6 days, but it's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily have to be one whip in those 6 days. You could split it up into daily whips so the client can see the progress. So I'll just show you the, so I ended up sending 9 versions, and this one here is the animatic, and I think I animated that all the way through, yeah. And then each iteration I sort of replace the animatic parts with more, I finished the animation as I was going through. So you could do it this way, you could do it as, they've signed off the animatic, they've signed off the timing, and then you're going to do the main animation, and you're literally just going to spend 6 days, or, however long you decide, working on that finished animation. Or if the client's eager to see something every day, and some are, some particularly if they, they might not trust you, if you're working remotely, which, hey, everyone is at the moment, aren't they? If you're working remotely, they might want to see daily progress. You might be doing it for an agency. So you might not be working direct with client. You might be working through an agency, and they want to see what you're doing every day. So this could be, so in this case, I've actually allowed 2 days for amends. And like for a project this size, and you know, if whatever your day rate is, if the budget worked out to be 2 weeks, this would be a pretty good split of the time that you'd want to spend on things. You definitely want to allow time for amends, but this time the 2 days for amends could be folded into the 6 days of animation. So if you're sending daily whips, you're going to get feedback along the way, and so these 2 days would be folded in. So you'd have 1 day for the animatic, and then 8 days for sending whips daily, and then this last day I've left for like final touches, which is basically sort of like just the icing on the cake. It's like little touches that sort of make the animation nicer, but it's not essential to the animation or telling the story. Okay, we're going to jump into Illustrator because that's where the assets were created. I should have said at the beginning, this isn't going to be like a tutorial where I'm going to spend ages going through how I did everything in this project. There's not enough time for that. I'll sort of pull up certain bits and look at certain techniques and expressions and, you know, what a problem solving that I might have used. But it is going to be the more generally the process of, you know, creating an animation like this. So let's have a look. Okay, so this is how I supplied the assets. So it is one big Illustrator file. So to create a storyboard, in this case, I need to get all of these assets into After Effects and create an animatic as quickly as I can, just for timing purposes. So there's a few ways of doing this. What you could do is select the assets that you need. So I'm not a big fan of how this is laid out. Quinny's great. We love her, but damn, this is awkward. But so I'm gonna copy that and then new document. Paste, and yeah, it's given me, so just delete all the stuff I don't need, and then move it into the work area, the board. And then you've got to, so what you've got to do is, at some point, if you're working from Illustrator assets, you need to layer stuff up. So in this case, I've got these. I'm going to delete these arrows, which have just been created for the storyboard to give the client an idea of movement. So I don't need those. So I might say, I'm only going to do this quickly because we're going to jump quickly to a quick way of doing this. But so icon 1, I've got the cage there, I need to delete. So lock the background and then icon 2, etc. So you get the idea. You've got to have everything that you're animating in Illustrator. You need a layer for each element, and then when you import that in, so you've got 3 and 5. Okay, so I've split it into the elements I'm going to need to animate, And if there's anything that you're going to want to tweak in After Effects, you still have the option of right-clicking and go and create shapes from vector layer. So in this case, I wanted to make a, and if I go back to the animation, so here, no, that's the animatic, hold on. So I want a camera move from left to right. So create a new camera, and again, I'm going all the stuff that I'm doing in After Effects. I'm just going to go through quickly. This has been recorded, so you'll be able to review it online. But I'm really not interested in showing people how to move the camera around 3D environment. I want to sort of give you time-saving tips. So I'm just going to do this quickly. Make sure auto orientation's off. Change these to 3D layers, and move the camera. So any elements like the background, if we make that, we don't need that to be a 3D layer, so we can just make that 2D layer and lock it. And then this haystack, because we've got the outlines now. If we press UU, that'll give us the. UU is a good shortcut in After Effects for especially shape layers. It'll uncollapse most of the important things in a shape layer that you need. In this case, it's the path. And so what we can do is delete the points of the path and then make it, grab our convert vertex tool and blah, blah, blah. And we can create, we can extend out the elements that we need. But what's a bit time consuming and is a pain is all the layering stuff and naming them. And the more assets you've got, if we go back to this storyboard, here especially, for example, like this map, if I wanted to layer this and if I wanted sort of control over, sort of bringing on these dots individually, or, like this one here, there's quite a few, there's quite a few layers. It's quite a lot of work to prep all this stuff for animation in After Effects. So, I'll wait that a sec. So what I'd recommend is using Overlord, which is, it's a paid for plugin, but it's very handy for this sort of work. So if you ended up doing a lot of this sort of work, it's going to be a big time saver. So you've got to think the cost, which is, it's like $30 or whatever, it's going to pay for itself just with one project. And you'd probably want to budget, you might budget a project thinking, if you haven't already got something like that, or if you need a specific script or something, just work that into the budget, and then you've got it moving forward. So with Overlord, what it will do is it'll push layers directly into After Effects for you without having to create individual files. So let's see if I can go in and grab maybe this one here. Okay, so just need create a new comp. And then, so Overlord, it's you have a plugin in Illustrator and a plugin in After Effects. So in Illustrator, you just click push selection to AE. And just wait while it does its thing. But you can already see it's giving you all of the layers that you'd have to be creating yourself. Damn, there's more than I thought for this one. Why is there so many? Okay. So, just going to grab them, move it across. I'm not sure in this case why it's giving me so many. Solo some of these. It's going to push everything that's in Illustrator. So if there are any rogue, I think what it is I haven't selected all the points on this, so it's pushed each individual vertex point here, perhaps. But so that probably hasn't sold to you how quick it is. But if you ignore all of those rogue ones, just going to select this, for example. So that. There should be about sort of 20 here if I've done it correctly. But what I'm going to do is try and find one that needs splitting up. So if you've got anything that's grouped in Illustrator, let's have a look. Okay, yeah. So let's do this one here, and hopefully this one works a little bit better. Okay. Okay, yeah, that's more like it. So this one's got 13 layers, and there we go. Because all of this stuff's going to have to be split up into separate layers to animate in After Effects at some point anyway. So probably roughly if you think about it, there's about 25 frames for this storyboard. I'd guess, because I've done this a lot before I started using Overlord, which was annoying me recently. And something like this, you're probably looking at just like minimum 2 hours, just prepping all this stuff and creating different files for different AI files for After Effects. Whereas this, it's a lot quicker. So, and also another thing is, say this claw here. So I didn't end up animating this, but if I had, I've got this claw, and to animate it, I need to split this up, and it's giving me a shapefile with a group for each component of this. And it's a bit of a faff to split it up into different elements. Like you could uncollapse it down and either turn these off or delete them, and then rename each bit, etc. There's another script called Explode Shape Layers, where you just click and it splits it up into individual shape layers for you. And I think it even centers the anchor point for you. Yeah. So there's an anchor point, the center of each layer split. Okay. So when you've done all of that, I'm just going to delete these. Should have a comp for each frame, which you can then create an animatic with. So if we call this animatic, and what you do is, so this is where if you had a voiceover, you'd drop the voiceover in now and have that as a guide for the timings. This doesn't have a voiceover, so I'm just looking at each frame and how long it takes me to read text. So to do a rough animatic, you'd maybe time how long it takes you to read this, and then Control-Shift-D, and then Alt replace that, drop the next frame in, cut to the next frame, time how long that takes, Control-Alt-D again. Okay, so that would be a quick version of the animatic, and I mean you can probably get an idea that to do that, probably only going to take you about an hour, hour and a half. So what I did was a slightly animated animatic, if that's not a stupid phrase, which it is. So I put some animation in, but just quick animation to give a sense of, you know, so it wasn't so rough and ready as just cutting between frames, and any bits in there that I can animate quickly. So we'll go back to the animatic. So bear in mind, I budgeted like a certain amount of time, so maybe it was a day. So with this, so it's got very rough animation. Like you're not spending ages finessing keyframes. You don't want this part to take long. So just keyframing position is quite simple. Like this transition, for example, you know, if you look carefully, and if I open it in something where I can scroll through frame by frame. Okay. The mix, you know, it's a really ugly mix between the two, but you're just knocking this up quickly so they can get a sense, so client can get a sense of what's going to be animated without spending absolutely ages on it. Okay, so another thing when you're doing the animatic, and actually in this case it was definitely worth doing an animatic, because one of the notes was we want longer to read the text, which I should have anticipated, but you'll often get that. So once the timing of that was locked down, then when you move on to the main part of the animation, considerations you want to have a look at are, and let's go back to the storyboard. So this is when you want to start thinking about how you're going to transition from one scene to another, and it may be dictated in the storyboard. So let's see. So I mean, this first transition, it's described in the storyboard, and it makes sense on a sort of instinctual level. You've got very similar shaped devices, and the background's the same. So the device transition to a tablet, that's kind of a no-brainer. Then there's, so frame 4 to frame 5, the camera moves down to the haystacks. So there's no, looking at this here, there's no real indication of how you're going to get from frame 4, the camera moving down, because this background color here, for a start, is the same as the sky, if you want to call it sky, and then you've got the ground here. So just the camera moving down, it's maybe that's not the best way to animate it. I mean, you've got this jumping sort of crown thing is sort of jumping up and down. So you have got like an up and down movement, and maybe as it jumps down, then maybe the camera could move down. But this is when you want to start thinking about sort of motion graphics approaches to creating an animation, which will give you sort of pleasing results, or the user pleasing results. So you've got morphs, which are and again, if we look at the final thing, so this here would be an example of this music. God. So this would be an example of a morph from this frame to that frame. So the elements are morphing from one to the other. Whereas here, what I decided to do was a match cut. So it's a quicker way of transitioning from one frame to the other, which can still have a very nice, pleasing effect if it's done well, but it's a lot quicker to do. So that's something you want to consider if you're animating something is, do I have the budget to do lots of time-consuming, complicated morphs, or do I want to pick certain parts where I'm going to spend more time animating something, and other parts I'm just going to be clever and use movement to transition from one to the other. So this is what I'm talking about here. So the match cuts, your eyes following this user icon here. So as it drops down, that's the match cut there. So you're cut into the next frame. It's very quick to do because you're just matching the movement of the user icon becoming the magnifying glass. And again, there's another match cut when it transitions into a magnet. So as it moves across, cut, now it's a magnet. So those are very quick to do, compared to something like this, which I did. Hopefully they rendered okay. I exported some screen recording of me actually working on it, which is in footage, time lapse. So 0 Tetris. So this is needed to create expressions, use expressions for the sort of blocky movement of like the Tetris games. It comes down, it's not fluid, it's sort of jaggedy, and there's a grid there. So that's why there's a grid in the background, because they move on a grid. So to make it look realistic. So that took a while to do. But the transition itself, which should be in here, and again, going on Creative Cow, looking for help with expressions. This is the problem-solving part of it. So, I mean, some parts of it, you'll look at a storyboard and you'll go, okay, I know how to do this, and I know how long it's going to take. So, you know, maybe this bouncing up and down, a camera move from left to right, you know, 3D layers. You know how long it's going to take. You know you're not going to run into any problems. There's some parts where you're going to need to spend a little bit more time problem solving. And, you know, I could have, you know, with this, you know, with the movement on it, you could do, you know, you could do hold keyframes to give you that effect. And it might take a similar amount of time, but it's, you know, if you're amending it, it's a faff and it's not a very elegant solution. So sometimes creating, you know, working it out with expressions is a bit more, you know, elegant. And also when there's amends later on down the line, that makes it easier as well. So the transition, the idea came from, and again, it's a case of sort of going through the storyboard. When you come to the sort of main animation part of it, looking and going, how do things want to be animated and what makes sense? So in this case here, it wasn't described in the storyboard. So Facebook window shows, left side icons starting from blank, blah, blah, blah. That's all this stuff, that's fine. Animation from top to bottom, okay. Then there's actually no hint in the storyboard of how it's going to animate from frame 14 to 15. So, you know, if you've ever played Tetris, you know how the blocks animate down. So you know there's going to be movement from the top of the screen down to the bottom, but how to get from this frame to that frame. And in the animatic stage, what I did was, again, just client whips. So this is the first animatic. What I did was put a lot of wipes in. So just wipe from one frame to the other. Some I didn't even animate the frames, but put sort of basic movement in and pushed, maybe pushed through on certain frames. So I knew this was going to be a tunnel, and what's quick to do? Well, put in things in 3D space or 2.5D in After Effects and pushing the camera through. That's quick to do, and you've got a sense of movement in there. But for the final animation, you want something a bit better than that, and also you want something that sort of serves the narrative. And so if you've got a Facebook, if you've got a pop-up window, well, if it's if you're closing it, and so my thinking here was, well, you're potentially to go from frame 14 to frame 15, you'd be closing that window, and when a window closes, depending on what operating system you're using or whatever, sometimes they sort of they close and they sort of do this sort of flowing movement. Describing that really badly, but that's what. If we go back to it. That's what this is meant to be. So it's meant to be you're closing the browser window. And that kind of leaves you, you've got this just decorative yellow space here, which is sort of like an L shape. So I thought, well, you've got L shapes in the Tetris game. So maybe as it closes, it leaves an L shape, and then that takes it to the next transition. So anytime when you look, sometimes sometimes you just need to think, sort of identify maybe shapes and movement to sort of get you from one to the other. But this transitioning from that to that and then animating this took a lot more time than it did to do the match cuts. So I just want to talk quickly about the difference in the storyboard that I mentioned earlier on. I think and I've worked as a, well, not head, a creative sort of head in a studio, and had designers. And if you're not there to just do as you're told and just animate this unthinking, I mean, that's not going to be fun for you either. So if you should always be thinking, how can I, is this the best version of what it can be? Can I do a better job? Is there anything I can add to this? And the one problem I had was this this sort of visual metaphor for choosing the audience that you want. So because for the analogy to work, you've got this claw machine, but that still leaves a lot to chance. I mean, the claw machine itself is an absolute pain in the arse. They never get the the prize. You never get the prize with the claw machine. So why would you want to use that as your analogy? So that's why I did this coin machine, and I watch an awful lot of Tipping Point. Probably should be going to more galleries and the opera, but no, I watch Tipping Point. So I just thought this is a better analogy. You've got, you're feeding money into a machine and you're leaving it to chance for the prize or the money to come out of it. So instead of making it this claw machine, make it this coin pushing machine. And then you're saying that so in this instance, I actually suggested, because I mentioned it to the client, my sister, and said, look, we might need to add a couple of lines to the script to make it make sense, because you're going, in here it says, take you straight to paying users, choose the audience you want. So I think, so we've got here, take you straight to paying users. And again, another easy sort of match, you're always guiding the viewer's eye. So you've got you're following the icon that's in the center of the screen, take that down, drop it here on the coin machine. So I think we added the line, take the luck out of finding paying users. Just so it's completely clear, this analogy, and then choose the audiences you want. And then, so it's, Bango, this product Bango is like the equivalent of going into one of these coin machines, grabbing the coin and, your paying user icon. And then we transition to this next scene. Wow, this time's going by really quickly. Okay, what else can we look at? Okay, so I made some notes. Let's have a look. Yep, a couple more. So we've done that. Yep. Okay, so actually quickly, another workflow tip is in this case, and my students and basically everyone I've worked with probably will be sick to death of hearing this, but sort of it's a good practice to have like master controls in a project, where if a client changes something, it makes it easier for you to change things, so you're not changing things throughout. And I'll show you what I mean. So in this instance, we've got all these different comps with assets in, okay? Now, they're all separate layers in these comps, okay? So we've got this user icon here, and it's a graphic, okay? So what if the client at one point changed, wanted to change the look of this? So, maybe they didn't like they wanted it to just be like the head and the body without this, without the sort of shape here. So in this case, what I do is I'd have a pre-comp for this. So copy, and so what I'm going to do is call this user icon. I'm going to make the comp square because it needs to be square. I'm going to make it big. I'm going to always scale it down and paste it. Control home to center it, and let's scale it up. And I'm trying to unsolo this. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of the color because all of these are just two colors here. So they're always white, and they've always got sort of one color. So we can tint these anyway. So then throughout, you're using this user icon. So you're dragging it in. So if we go into Storyboard, I knew that I picked one that didn't have one in, and I knew that I picked another one that didn't have one in. This is getting ridiculous now. Here we go, back to the one where I got it from. So let's go to this one instead. So instead of all these separate graphics, so if you had to amend one, it's a real faff. So we'd just delete, and we've got to animate these anyway. So bring on user icon, and then go to tint, drag that on, and so for the colors, what I do is, because we've got brand colors, okay, and so the clients applied their brand guidelines, they've got specific colors. So what Quilly did, which was super helpful and shows that she's worked with clients before, is put all the brand colors as swatches up here. So I'm going to copy those and create a new comp, call it brand colors, paste them. No, might have to, what am I thinking? Overlord, sorry. Push that. Okay. And let's find where those are. So what you could do is just gonna go to null, select all. So you could have that brand colors as a comp that you bring into your other comps and set as a guide layer, just to check you've got the right colors. So here, so then if you want to tint it, okay. An even better way is to use an expression to color control them. That way, if if God forbid the client, wanted to change colors of certain things later on down the line, if there's any amends, you're only having to change it in one place because you've got these brand colors here. Okay. I mean, one thing I do as well is go into brand guidelines, grab the hex value. So let's grab this pink here. Just double check that. Don't rely on the illustrator to have got the colors correct. You to reveal the color and just paste that and check it's the. I think yeah, I think she did, but yeah. But you can actually color. You can expression control colors to this. So I'm going to grab this and move it to the right, and then the comp that we had there. So just going to turn that off, and just need to reveal the color there. So we can actually pick whip this matte black to this brand colors comp. And actually one other thing I'm going to do is, before I do that, have they given these a name? No. Okay. Sometimes the client will give the colors a name, but what we could do is, you've got primary, let's say primary 1, 2, 3. So this would be primary 3, and then you've got additional 1, 2, 3, and then you've got background color palette. So primary 3 in that case. So that's primary 03. And then, so this one is primary 02. And as long as those comps are called the same thing, I mean, in this instance, I'd actually have like a null with you know, expression controls on here, but this will work just the same. So I'm going to just color pick from there to there. Now, get rid of that. So now if I press E for the expression, so this is now the fill on this is now driven by that. So we could have this user icon is, you know, could be in other. Let's yeah. So it could be in this scene as well. Okay. You know, it's the same icon being used throughout. So if the client changed the color for whatever reason, you've got this brand colors, and then you change that to something obviously not these brand colors. Yep, and then it's updated there. And it doesn't have to be just for colors, you know, it could be you know, other assets if you've got a project that's, you know, with assets that you're using throughout. But then, you know, you've got all the backgrounds of you know, of this are, you know, you've got consistent colors throughout. So, you know, it's a good way of making sure that all the colors are brand colors, and, you know, you're future proofing yourself against you know, like time consuming amends later on down the line. Okay, wow, that went by really quickly. I guess now, if there's any questions that anyone has, now would be a good time. So let's have a look at the chat. Adam, please wrap up before 7, as it would automatically sign out at 7. Okay, all right. So I don't know whether that means we've got time for any questions. Let's ask. So Sinead, does that mean we have got time for questions, or? Right, okay, sorry, 2 minutes. Do you do this color association with Animate or after? I find it's very time consuming. So I'm assuming you're meaning Animate software or After Effects. This is, no, I mean, this is all in After Effects, if that's the question that you're asking. Oh, Addy, great job. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. It seems time consuming at the beginning to do this. So this is Sonia, but honestly, it's. I mean, once you've done one, and I'm going to see if I can quickly share my screen again. But once you've done it once, like set up the expression, you copy that expression onto other layers. And then if you've named something, if you've named everything well in the master brand colors comp, then it's very easy for you to sort of go in and then retype, you know. So in this case, I've got primary, and I'm not sharing my screen, so you'll just have to sort of, you know, imagine. But I can look at the expression code, and I've got primary 03, and I can just change the 3 to a 2. I know it's going to be the second color. So what I always say to my students is, you know, like good housekeeping at the beginning, like having a folder structure, having your shit together, having things organized. It seems a bit time consuming at the beginning, but it really does save you a lot of time overall. Okay. What is, so Simon, what is the name of the plugin to transfer files from AE? That's Overlord. Hold on, let me just, it's called plugin Overlord. Yeah, so if you Google Battle Axe Overlord, you'll find that. See if there's any other questions. Okay, well, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. I think it's going to sign me out. So thank you for everyone who joined in the seminar, webinar rather, and hope to see some of you in a future class. Okay, thanks a lot.